Hello, everyone. Today we have special guest, Chargo Akiol, a postdoc at Gent University. And I'm very excited to today's podcast because we'll be discussing very interesting topics around water and wastewater engineering, resource recovery from wastewater and sludge, occurrence and effects of microplastics in water and wastewater treatment plants. Basically, Chargo has been building his research career around environmental science, waste management, environmental engineering, molecular biology, and microbiology. So I'm very sure today we'll have very interesting discussion. As well, you can find Chargis on social media, on LinkedIn. He's very active. I like your post. So I will provide his link. As well, you can find his research papers. I will also provide link to his research papers on the descriptions. Okay, welcome and thanks for being here, Chargo.
Thank you very much, Nazark, and thank you very much for having me initially. It's a pleasure.
So I will jump into the questions. So first,
all right.
I've seen on your LinkedIn, you also happily posted it, that European Parliament endorsed a 35 BCM binding target for biomethane and EU gas package. What was your reaction when you saw this news?
Well, of course, on one hand, the cause behind, of course, is devastating. I mean, I wish none of them would happen. Well, it's happened. But yeah, actually, we are in this situation. I mean, of course, all of us are really sorry about what happened and what has been happening in Ukraine. But unfortunately, it happened, and now we have to, as Europe, take actions and measures. So when I heard about these targets, of course, the first thing came to my mind was, okay, next year will be the year of biogas and biomethane. So there will be lots of investments, lots of funding for new projects. So that was my excitement, honestly. So the cause behind is sad, of course. As I said, this is the situation at the moment. So we are moving to these targets.
Mm-hmm. So you are also doing your research around this topic, actually, biomethane, biogas, and you are aware how it will influence the EU energy production. So could you share with your opinion how it could impact?
Yeah, the thing is, the target is 35 billion cubic meters. But based on the estimations, I think the feedstock potential of biomethane in Europe is around 40 billion cubic meters. So even beyond the target. So in that sense, it's reachable. Thing is, the most dominant countries will be more or less the same in the coming years, which are France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and Poland. So this will remain more or less the same. Maybe there will be a change in the dominant feedstock, because at the moment, the more dominant feedstock in Europe is manure, followed by agricultural residues, and then sequential crops. So within a few years later, I think sequential crops will dominate the feedstocks, then followed by manure and other agricultural residues. But the important point is that now what the member states need to do, they need to translate these targets into their national policies. So, and they really take measures in terms of permits, investments, certifications to really deploy these measures in their own nations and in their own regions.
Mm-hmm. So for people who don't know, 35 BCM is, I just looked up from the internet, is over 20% of the current whole EU's gas imports from Russia, right?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. So it's very competitive renewable energy source, which can we assume that it can replace at some certain point fossil fuels?
Definitely, of course, definitely, it can easily. And actually, at the moment, even before the situation in the unfortunate situation in Ukraine, in 2021 there was already an increase in the biomethane production in Europe, a huge increase. Then last year there was a record of number of biomethane plant installations throughout Europe. So it's really the progress is really promising, but of course we need to do much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you've been also mentioning that there are only several countries that are dominant in this area. So now the goal is to also develop in other EU countries.
Exactly.
Okay. And you've been mentioning several times the Russia situation. I know it's very devastating. Actually, I'm from Kazakhstan. It also has a huge impact on Central Asia as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Russia cut off the energy from EU. And then do you think it was the main motivation to Europe to invest more in renewable energy source? Or it was, even if Russia didn't cut it out, would it be in the same path right now? You were saying that it was record.
Yes, we were moving towards it, but of course that was triggered a lot. I mean, that was made a huge impact, I think, to increase the targets even higher. But of course we were moving towards that direction. So what at the moment we need to do, actually what is expected from the member states, that they really need to, not only biogas and biomethane, but they really need to diversify their energy supplier sources and routes. And they really need to accelerate the deployment of renewable energy. And also, they also need to further improve the existing energy efficiency and better connect between the gas and electric measures.
You also point out that Russia had a huge impact, right?
Definitely.
So it was
Yeah, it happened, unfortunately, and now we have to see the good side of it, that it really accelerated environmental and issues, especially. Yeah, at the moment we have the crisis on the energy. We also have some, not exactly, wouldn't say a crisis on food, but of course it's affected. The fertilizers are definitely affected. So in that sense, I think we are moving in a good direction.
Actually, how I came across on your research and also about what you are doing was one of the webinars where you were talking about Nutri2Cycle project. I find it very interesting, and also my project NutriBudget is the continuous of the Nutri2Cycle. Could you share with us some of the findings and briefly about the Nutri2Cycle project?
Sure. It's really difficult to briefly talk about Nutri2Cycle. It's a complex project similar to NutriBudget. They are both really complex and huge projects. Well, I joined Nutri2Cycle in the middle because it started in 2018 and will finish this September. So I jumped into the project team in 2021. It's a Horizon 2020 project, and there are 19 partners from 12 European countries. And basically what we try to do is we try to improve nutrient use efficiency using on-farm techniques and systems and practices to enable the transition from the existing practices to more innovative next generation ones via better management of the nutrients and of course organic carbon. We have lots of ongoing and investigated solutions, but we further created a short list of them, and then we further picked and further investigated the selected solutions as lighthouse demos, as we call. But in general, in all our proposed solutions, we try to better reconnect the management and design of animal husbandry, the plant production, the management of agricultural flows, and also agro-processing. and also their connection to food production. And we try to put forward the return of organic soil, organic carbon to the soil, and better management of the nutrients, and also try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on farm scale, of course. But when you see the whole picture, of course, collectively, they have a huge impact on the European level. So we have 14 lighthouse demos in 8 countries, dealing with a variety of different nutrient recovery and recycling practices, I have to say. But if anyone is even more interested, of course, because it's really difficult to talk one by one about each of them. But if we have a nice website that is updated, so everyone can check. We even have the videos of each lighthouse demos, for instance, told by the leader of that demo. So it's very interesting because they are most of the time being told in native language, but we have the English subtitles, so anyone can check.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I could also find very useful information for my project from the Nutri2Cycle website.
Yeah,
I can for sure provide the link as well. So earlier you mentioned that there is it's shift to from the current nutrient cycle to the future renewable source. So what is the problem with the current nutri cycle? And also, like, what is the circular economy? I know that it's very tightly linked. So if you could briefly.
Definitely. Yeah, well, yeah, we are all the time talking about circular economy, but we are still not there. Or it's still, well, maybe we can first talk about linear economy, which is unfortunately still the current practice. So it's basically refers to the production of food or materials or whatever. So you take from the nature for the raw materials, then you manufacture and produce them as food and materials and whatever. And then when you consume them, in the end, you discard them as waste. So this is the linear model. But in the circular economy model, these raw materials are recirculated. But of course, at first, you try to prevent producing waste and pollutions. But then you don't waste them, but you valorize them at their highest value. So you try to create a closed loop. Then you recirculate these raw materials in the system.
Mm-hmm. To be honest, when I first read a paper about circular economy, it just seemed so obvious, and what, as a humanity, we needed to do. Because in the future, of course, the population is growing year by year, decade by decade, and also the fertile soils are decreasing in the world. So it means it's very, let's say, logical solution to come up as the population increase, as the fertile soil decrease. So we need to be able to, with a limited source, or recycle our nutrients, because you know that phosphorus, which we'll talk about later, is very limited. It takes thousands of years to recycle, to close the loop of phosphorus cycle. Yeah. It looked like very futuristic and also the best solution. Yes, because, as a people, we used to think we were born and what we saw was just linear economy. So we just buy stuffs and we just use them and then we store them away.
It's trash. Unfortunately, it's still the common practice for the most majority. I mean, as with scientists, we are aware of it, we do our best, but people who are not actually from this, who are not aware of this concept, are still doing their practices as wasting. They do not really care about these proposed new solutions. But I think we are still trying to, we are still progressing, and it's, I mean, it's promising, but it will take time. Of course, it's not easy to change people's habits. It takes time.
The products, the waste could be any source. So it could be the crop materials, as you said, the crop residues from agricultural, and also the waste and wastewater from the bathroom, toilets, everything, and the rest. And then there is anaerobic digestion or other process. After that, there are also one of the outputs of this anaerobic digestion is bio-based fertilizers, right?
One of them, yes.
One of them.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well, it's funny because just last week we had a webinar on a lexicon that was produced from another Horizon project, a European project, Walnuts. So they include the definition of those terms, including bio-based fertilizers, and we literally spent an hour on bio-based fertilizer term, because there are lots of ongoing opinions, and no matter how you define it, something is all the time missing, because it's really difficult. From their point of view, for instance, they excluded anaerobic digestion on composting because there your main target is not up concentrating the nutrients. Yes, they do. In my opinion, it should be included, anaerobic digestion or composting. And bio-based fertilizer is a bit of a conceptual term for me, because the debate was if the origin of the waste is a biological origin or if the end product, because sometimes you also use chemicals during these processes. And in the end, you have a bio-based, biomass derived waste, organic waste. But then during the process, you may add some chemicals as well. For instance, scrubbing. So yes, you are trying to recover nitrogen from, let's say, manure or digestate, and you do it via sulfuric acid or nitric acid. Then in the end, you end up with ammonium sulfate or ammonium nitrate. But the second product, you add acid, which is not a bio-based material. So in the end, how should you call this material? Bio-based fertilizer? Or so the debate is a bit still ongoing. But I have to say it's a conceptual definition for me, not exactly the definition of a certain product.
So I know it's a new product that is already evolving, very young, let's say. But at the same time, I just know that there is, from anaerobic digestion, we can get bio-based fertilizers, or maybe in the future we will call it differently. But for now, bio-based fertilizers. Are there any other source, or how they are made of? So if you could just give us a brief introductory.
Technologies, it could be a physical one, chemical one, biological one. The variety of so huge, but depending on your, of course, technology and the feedstock, you end up with a different material. So composting, for instance, is the oldest one among them. And it was actually a practice that has been used for all decades. But it was, of course, from 20 or 30 years ago, it was not called bio-based fertilizer. Well, it's still not exactly a bio-based fertilizer. It depends on its nutrient and organic carbon and so on. But there are lots of other technologies that is being used. So it's really difficult to give an exact definition. That's why.
Yeah, so there are...
Anaerobic digestion is just one of them. And of course, it has more benefits because on one hand, you produce energy. On the other hand, you recover nutrients, and you has a high nutrient product, which is a digestate.
Yes. So the big picture, because for our listeners, I apologize because I'm very familiar. I'm also working in this area. For me, it's very familiar what we mean by anaerobic digestion. But if we give the whole picture, so we have the waste. First step, we have the waste from agriculture or from the wastewater or just waste, organic waste, and etc., etc. So those wastes are then gathered all together or separately, as you mentioned, and then put into the big container, and then left. I think it's with water, right? The anaerobic.
It depends. It can be wet fermentation or it can be a solid state as well. So it depends on the operation mode or, of course, on your feedstock. It can be diluted as well with, for instance, wastewater or sewage sludge. So in the absence of oxygen, then you break down the organic material first into fatty acids. Then they are converted to methane and carbon dioxide mainly, with also other trace gases as well.
Yeah, I couldn't even say that. So you are an expert in this area. And so those are the gas that are...
Yes, in the end, gas is formed. In the gas form, you have methane and carbon dioxide mainly. Then also you have the solid form, of course, which is called digestate, that which we can use as a bio-waste fertilizer, depending on its, of course, characteristics.
And the gas is used as an energy source.
Yes, indeed. Then you can either use it to produce heat and electricity in combined heat power plants, or you can upgrade it. Upgrading means removing carbon dioxide and plus other trace gases. Then you reach up to 99% around of methane, which is a substitute to natural gas.
Okay, so from the digestate, and then digestate is the main source of the biofertilizer.
Exactly. Yes.
Of course, there are pre-processing steps, but still,
because for instance, in Flanders, Belgium, you cannot directly apply digestate to the soil because in Flanders, like in the Netherlands, Denmark, Luxembourg, is a nutrient surplus region. So we have a problem is first with nitrogen and then with phosphorus. So that's why you then have to recover, let's say, or in that sense, it could be also called as removing, and apply the amount you need, not the excess ones. So what we do in Flanders, we then export manure and digestate to France, for instance.
I see. When I was preparing for this interview, I also that you've done some research on microplastics in water and wastewater treatment plants. We know that plastics are kept or not decomposed for thousands of years. So are there a serious problem? Because if we have in the water or wastewater the microplastics.
Exactly. Maybe beginning with the definition of microplastics, maybe some of the listeners are not so familiar. It's, obviously small plastic particles or fibers smaller than 5 millimeters.
So we cannot see it visually with our...
The biggest ones, yeah. But of course, they are down to micrometers as well. So there's a range. And the source there can be primary ones, which are manufactured and used in many personal care products. Then the secondary ones are being formed as the breakdown of the big plastic particles in, for instance, with the sunlight, in the water, in the heat. Then they are also formed in that way. The thing is, up to a few years ago, we were not even aware of this problem, but at the moment it's a hot topic and I think it's a severe problem Because the thing is, they're all the time being recirculated in the water cycle and then end up in the soil environments as well. The concern begins with their detection in aquatic environments, then further in aquatic organisms. Then I think it was last year, it was detected in human blood and breast milk.
Oh my God.
So at the moment, we are exposed to microplastics. So, but what they do not have a acute effect on the organisms, but they have chronic effects in the long term because some of them can be toxic, and some toxic chemicals can be added due to their production stage, and was polyester, I think, for instance, or they also act as a vector to other contaminants such as heavy metals. So in this way, they have in the long term chronic effects. In water and wastewater treatment, the thing is, the wastewater treatment plants are actually like sinks because, well, if you look at the literature, of course, you see that there's a huge removal rate of microplastics from the effluents of treatment plants, even conventional ones. If you apply more advanced technologies, yeah, it's true, you reach up to 99% of removal from the effluent, but it's not actually removed. It's transferred from the water cycle to the sludge. You cannot remove them. You just transfer them from the water to the sludge, and they end up in the sludge. They accumulate in the sludge. Then, depending on your sludge fate, it may end up in the soil because sludge is also one of the raw materials that you recover nutrients, recover other bio-based materials. So they also end up in those materials, or if they're applied to the soil, they also end up in the soil. So in that case, also, of course, in drinking water treatment plants as well, because the discharge water ends up in a receiving water body. Then this is all the time recirculated in the water cycle, and in the tap water, I also drink tap water, and yes, there are microplastics.
We all drink tap water,
Yeah.
so there are.
Yes.
Can we say that all the humanity right now on the earth have some microplastics?
Exposed to microplastics, exactly.
We are all exposed.
Yes.
Okay. So even if we put some filters in our tap waters,
It helps. Definitely it helps. But I'm not sure if this is the solution. I mean, yeah, you protect yourself, but then the environment, then the aquatic organisms.
of course, even when you go to restaurants, we don't know if their water is cycled. Yeah. Okay, I see. Well, still, I believe that we are discovering this kind of problems, and we are, we never give up. So the engineers, I see that they're doing lots of interesting research and trying to find a solution, as well as the current challenges. Like, I'm interested to know, what are the current challenges in water and wastewater engineering?
Moving on with the microplastics, I have to say contaminants of emerging concern. I have to say because microplastics are not included in that list as far as I know, but lots of personal care products, pharmaceuticals, pesticides are included in that list. And the problem is the conventional wastewater treatment plants are not designed to remove these chemicals or materials. So in the end, they're all the time being discharged to the environment. So this is, I think, one of the most challenging, because if you apply advanced technologies, yes, you achieve good removal rates and everything, but this is not the case all around the world. Then we all the time well, we are in Europe, so let's talk about Europe. Europe is all the time, well, not all the time, but time to time, update the regulations on water, wastewater, like, as you know. On one hand, it's of course good, but then complying with those new discharge limits, for instance, it's not easy because the existing treatment plants are not designed to do so. And if you think about a wastewater treatment plant, it never stops. So it's not really easy to stop a wastewater treatment plant for some operation, not time, and add a unit and so on. It's costly. It's also not really possible to completely stop. Well, of course, they have some parallel units, but it's not difficult. It's not easy. Then, sustainability of the treatment plants in terms of energy consumption, maybe, and their footprints, carbon footprints, water footprints. There is also some good achievement towards that, to design new processes, because especially biological treatment consumes a lot of energy in a wastewater treatment plant. And I think then, of course, we have the sludge, which is always a problem dealing with the sludge. But these days, also research is towards resource recovery from the sludge as well. But again, then there should be a flexibility in that plant to apply these technologies and practices.
Mm-hmm. So the problem with sludge is
how to handle the sludge, because considering that also, I forgot to say, during the microplastics, even if you achieve, let's say, 99.5 removal rate, considering the amount of wastewater being discharged around the world, it's a huge volume of wastewater, treated water. So even if the concentration is low, you discharge a lot of water. So with the sludge as well, you produce high volumes of sludge every day all around the world. And you have to, for instance, incineration is not a good way to handle sludge. So in that sense, again, we really have to focus on what we can really recover and how to valorize the sludge as well.
I see. All right. Well, of course, there are challenges, but now for the good news. So according to Bioden, I will also put this post on the description. So Gent University, where we both work, will start plant trials and soil incubation experiments together with a thorough characterization of the product's quality, including novel nitrogen fertilizers such as ammonium sulfate, ammonium citrate, and ammonium bicarbonate, and also phosphor-based fertilizers, calcium phosphate, true white, phosphor-absorbed biochar, together with nutrient-rich but carbon-rich biosolids that can be applied as a soil improver. So this is a good start. I think Gent University is, I'm very happy to be part of also this research where we are trying to research bio-based fertilizers in commercial farms. The idea is to replace the synthetic fertilizers with bio-based fertilizers, but I will not talk a lot about my research. And also you are also working around this topic. Mm-hmm. So there are a few interesting questions for me. So the first is, what do we know about the bio-based nitrogen fertilizers' impact on the environment? So as I said, we already know the environmental impacts of synthetic fertilizers, how they pollute the environment. And if we want to replace with bio-based fertilizers, do we know how it impacts the environment?
Yes. Well, not exactly in Bioden, because what we do in Bioden, yes, we recover nitrogen and produce nitrogen fertilizing products, and then we also recover phosphorus and produce phosphorus fertilizing products. But actually in nutracycle, we also test the environmental impacts of these products on farm level. So in nutracycle, we have lots of publications. Again, you can check on the website as well. Yes. So we do have some knowledge on that, their environmental impacts, such as ammonia emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and in most cases, they are similar to that of synthetic fertilizers. Sometimes performing better, and some cases they perform worse as well, depending on the parameter you are looking for. But indeed, we do have some research and published data as well in nutracycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will be still in the research because my research also focused on this.
Yes, it's still in here. Yes. But as you said, we do not have lots of sources on that in general, I have to say.
Yeah, exactly. If we had a lot of sources, I guess my research wouldn't exist.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So what is your take on this when we say to the farmers, okay, now you need to change your synthetic fertilizer to nitrogen, bio-based fertilizer. So how can we convince the farmers to use bio-based fertilizers? What are the main key points that makes the farmer to think, okay, this maybe is better option for me?
That is the most trickiest part, I think, in all projects, because if you cannot convince the farmers, then everything is wasted. I mean, whatever you do, if you cannot reach them, if you cannot convince them. But I have to say, farmers are really keen to use these bio-based fertilizers in their farms. Actually, not even in terms of fertilizers, but some farmers, but there are lots of farm-scale anaerobic digesters as well. Mm-hmm. They're really keen on to build anaerobic digesters to their farms because on one hand, they are self-efficient in terms of energy. They produce energy. Then in the end, they also produce their own fertilizer. So there's a closed loop within their farms. So in that sense, I think you have to include them to your projects, definitely, which we do. We always try to do. We always try to organize workshops, webinars, and everything. We try to reach them as much as possible. But I have to say, they're also willing to switch their common practices towards more circular way.
I see. Yes. So the fertilizer is not only one, it's multi-dimensional. First, you are getting fertilizer, but second, you're also getting energy.
Yeah, if you deploy anaerobic digestion, yes, definitely.
So you're also recycling your waste, so it's circular. The farmer can maintain its own waste and also energy.
Yeah,
okay,
definitely.
I see. It's very beneficial. Mm-hmm. A little bit painful part, the phosphorus. Well, we know that the phosphorus is limited and takes thousands of years. And of course, it's also essential element in organic life forms. For the organic life forms, can we close the current phosphorus demand with bio-based fertilizers?
It can be one of the solutions. Of course, there is not a single solution, unfortunately, but it has a major contribution to that. But yeah, a single solution doesn't exist to solve all of these problems. But if we see the whole picture in what we have been talking about, and phosphorus recovery and recycling definitely contributes a lot.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah. So for those people who are unfamiliar, also the listeners, I will also share with an article why the phosphorus is very essential and why we are so scared Because
especially for Europe, because in Europe, they are 90% dependent on external sources. So, especially in Europe, it's very critical.
Yes.
And reserves are all the time, of course, decreasing. So that's why phosphorus is really critical.
Maybe you can also share like what other agricultural practices contribute to less nutrient loss.
Using slow release fertilizers, for instance, is definitely a measure. Then some nature-based solutions are increasing. There's a huge increasing trend towards nature-based solutions, such as constructed wetlands, for instance, and then buffer strips as well. So these are measures that really can help to reduce nutrient losses to the environment in agricultural practices.
So, in general, what do you think about the future of bio-based fertilizers and renewable energy? As a person who has dedicated his research interest and research, like building a research career in this area.
When I'm an environmental engineer, and I started my bachelor in 2005. And back in the early 2000s, environmental engineering was still a bit of like, nobody was aware of what environmental engineers were doing. So, and it was promoted as the future promising job for us. In that time, I was like, when I was even studying, I was not sure what I was going to do. But as the years pass by, you see that environment is becoming the hot topic each year. So the importance of the environment increase year by year. So at the moment, it really is. So a few years ago, nobody was aware of it, but now at the moment, it really is. Because unfortunately, we are all the time facing environmental crisis. That's why. I mean,
that's true.
The reason behind is that. But we just talked about the future of energy again. But unfortunately, I think there had to be a unfortunate reason, bad reason, for us, for everyone to be aware of the problem. That's how it works, unfortunately. So in terms of energy, we have the targets now, but also not just for energy, we also have climate targets, lots of environmental targets that we need to achieve in the coming years. And with the, for instance, new fertilizing products regulation that came into force last year, I think we are moving again towards a good direction. Of course, there are still things need to be added, need to be updated. It's an ongoing process and a never-ending process as you progress with things. But I'm quite optimistic, honestly.
Okay, you think it has a huge potential. Well, right now, lots of people getting pessimistic about the climate crisis and everything. It's also becoming political.
In that sense, we are not going in a good direction, definitely. But there is also a progress. And we have to be optimistic. Otherwise, at least scientists, researchers, we do our best to communicate to the policymakers with some evidence-based outcomes and try to convince them to change things first. And I think this is slowly but happening.
So you are more a fighter than just...
Well, I wouldn't call myself a fighter, but at least I try to do my best. Yeah, there are people who are really dedicated to it, which I admire. But at least I have to say I might be at least a good researcher in that sense, maybe.
Yeah, I'm happy to see when I talk and also when I meet also see the works of people who are dedicating their life and also really trying their best. Of course, you are one of them. And I want to thank you for just working in this area and try to find solution and still fighting for your work has an impact on the whole humanity, not only Israel.
Yeah, all of us.
Yeah, all of us
involved in this area, indeed.
For our future. And thank you very much for doing this work and keep doing. I hope that, of course, in the future, maybe we'll have the second episode where you already found the solution for microplastics.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Something else. Yeah. I would be very excited. Now I have few questions, so the time passed by very quickly. Just general questions. You can answer as you want.
Okay.
What advice would you give to young researchers?
To young researchers, I also would like to be called as a young researcher, by the way, but I think you mean PhD students.
Yeah, sorry, I mean PhD.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. I think the most important part during your PhD is patience and keeping up your motivation. Especially the second is not so easy, and I especially see in some of the PhD students that they easily lose their motivation. But the thing is, there are ups and downs, whatever you do. I mean, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. So, yes, your experiments will fail. Yes, your papers will be rejected. I mean, very basically. But yeah, we all face it, and it's not the end of the world. If you do what you need to do, yeah, maybe sometimes you need to try harder. I all the time say, especially for the new beginners, but during your first period of your PhD, sometimes the things you do in the lab can be just a waste. Mm-hmm. You never know, because first you need to try and see how it works and everything. So the very first experiment is like a play for you, because you need to get used to it. So you should not expect all the time results with perfect outcomes and everything. So it's a process. It's a long process and dedication, of course. So
to be dedicated, keep motivated. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you kind of need to find yourself a motivation also. That's important. I mean, you have to create your own motivation. For instance, mine was writing the paper. Because when I first published the paper, I was super thrilled, because I discovered that when you write a paper, you actually tell a story. You cannot just say that, yeah, okay, I did this, and these are the results. This doesn't work. So you have to first state your problem, then you have to present your solution, how you do it, and then you have to give your main outcomes, of course, with your results. So there has to be a story. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense, especially for people who are a bit outside of the research area.
Not just being able to do the research in the lab, but you should also be able to present your work.
Exactly. That's half of it, in my opinion. If you cannot really present or sell your research, then it might not have a big impact.
Even though you had a good research, you still...
Definitely. How you present and how you sell it is really important.
Mm-hmm. I see. What skills can make a person a good researcher?
Good question. Well, it depends, I think, but I think you need to all the time question what you are doing. So you really have to have some research questions, and you should not overload yourself in that sense. So you really have to filter what you need to do, what you are trying to achieve, instead of doing all the possible things. So because sometimes they do not mean anything to you. So even it gets worse sometimes if you become a data freak, for instance. So you really have to have research questions, filter your, filter your methods, everything. And you have to combine your results with practical things. So what they really mean in practice. So that's also would be a good skill for some people. And then, of course, writing is important because I think people really suffer a lot with writing. I see that, for instance, for me, it's the easiest part because I enjoy it. I think you need to enjoy also writing. But as I said, if you see it as a storytelling, I think then it may be a bit more fun.
Mm-hmm. I'm one of them who
struggles with writing.
Yes, okay. I really struggle, but I'm still trying to work on it. Yeah, I agree. I also heard from one researcher. I also interviewed one of my professors from Boko University. She was also telling you need to tell the story.
Yeah,
because it's a story. Yeah, not just go by step by step. Yeah. Okay, I see. The last question: should one create meaning in life or look for it?
Both, I have to say. I mean, on one hand, you have to create within what you have. On one hand, you also still need to look for it and explore because life is full of surprises and we don't know what's going to happen in the tomorrow or the next few days, years. So first, you really have to see what you have in hand and try to find a motivation out of that. But then you also shouldn't stop exploring, definitely. So I would say both.
Thank you very much for being here today, and I appreciate a lot for giving some time to make this happen, and all the best on your research.
Thank you very much.
I'm one of your fan of your work.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure, if we meet up in the future to make a second episode of this, I would be willing to do that.
Definitely, that would be really nice. Thank you very much for having me again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.